Welcome to More Muchier with Pup Duffy and Keira Lane. Today we get to talk with co-writer and director D.M. Cunningham of the movie Three Demons, out July 5th.
Well, welcome everybody to the show. We are here with DM Cunningham, or Matt, as we are going to refer to him. I am feeling a little bit under the weather, and my beautiful partner Keira has done the lion's share of the work, and she's going to kind of carry the interview for me, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I did to listen, so let's get it on.
Okay.
Well, going off of what Pup just said about how humans are our own worst enemy, so to speak. I mean, you've got like Skynet and all of that other wonderful things that you've got the algorithm biases that humans put into those things. And this movie, Three Demons, is very much, I loved it. I watched it, and at first it was hard for me to understand what was going on. And there's a specific scene where it was just like, oh, that's what's going on. That's terrifying.
Oh, yeah. Good. Oh, thank you.
So my first question is, like, how was working with Peter Tell since as a writer and an actor? Because I knew you worked previously with him in the Spore movie.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that you wrote and you directed. So how was that, having him kind of as a writer working together with him in that regard?
Well, Pete and I hit it off when we did the Spore. We were pretty simpatico is fine. As far as like a lot of the ideas and the things, we were talking about the human story, the human element, that, like, I don't know, I think we were both kind of in this transitional phase, because I had actually just moved to Michigan with my family from Los Angeles before we did the Spore, where we had lived for about 21, 22 years there. And my wife's from Michigan, so that was kind of the reason why we came here. And we got talking about transition and the difficulties in transitioning and things like that. And it just kind of led us into this story. We were talking about it on Spore. Like, we just got kind of rambling about, like, wouldn't it be interesting if there was some, like, I don't know, like a possession movie from the point of view of the possessed? Like, how could we tackle that? And also not having, like, when you move and you don't know anybody, you feel like you don't have that much control over your life, and you're just kind of making your way through and figuring it out. So there was kind of these odd themes that were popping up, and it just seemed like it was kind of working for the story. Like, just feeling kind of out of place, and a little, I guess, a sense of who you are, in where you are. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
It actually answered into like my second question. So you're like ahead of the game.
Oh, good.
So that whole aspect with, the kind of it's schizophrenic. Mm-hmm. And I was able to, I have some history. Like, I have people in my life that suffer from it.
Yeah.
So I was able to pick up on that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But with that whole experience, like, my main takeaway from the piece itself was, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's what happens when the demons are within. Mm-hmm. And it really spoke to, like, the prison the mind can become, and the scope of how painful and lonely living with a mental illness can be. And it also focuses on the inability for some to determine reality from hallucinations, and drives home the point that more needs to be done, I think, for mental health crisis. Is this something that you both hoped would be conveyed from those watching the film?
Yes. Yeah, I think that that's a big thing for Pete and I too, talking about your mental health, your mental well-being, anything that people we know experience, or even ourselves go through, even things just like depression and how heavy that can be, and how in even a state of depression with a weight of that feels like on you. And sometimes you just can't even get motivated or get up to move and do stuff. And so we wanted to be like, here's Fisher. And within a span of this movie, when he's out there in this space, like, what if all of this is happening within like a 2 or 3 hour period of time? Like, he is just like that may be what's going on with people. You know, sometimes they get lost and they have no sense of time or place. And that's the whole point of that, is that, you know, you lose yourself, and those are things that we wanted to kind of touch on, not be too heavy-handed, but we also wanted to be, you know, I think the point of like what you said is the schizophrenia of the movie is because it's the point of view of him. Like there's no sense of linear anything. And that was what we wanted to do. And we knew we were kind of taking a big swing to make that movie that way, you know, and hoping that people would be like, oh, I see what they're doing, and they will or they won't. But I'm glad you did. You know, I'm glad that it struck a chord and hit with you.
Yeah, and like that's like the non-linear thing is like it took me a second, because you go into this and then you see like the occult ties, and then the I guess the final placement of you know, something to perpetuate that. So, and like I said, with the deep personal experiences that I've had with regards to schizophrenia, I found it really interesting that the movie tied the occult to Fisher, as he, you know, like when he's talking to the doctor and refers to a they. And it's commonly reported that those who suffer from schizophrenia share in like religious like delusions, like either having God speak to them, being possessed by demons. I know that you've done extensive research and work as a researcher for various TV series and movie documentaries. Did this come into play for you and Peter with regards to mental illness that Fisher has when writing the manuscript?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, you know, you want to be careful, like when you're doing this kind of things, you know, because you're shining a light on it, and you also want to tell like a scary story. And I think for us, the occult aspect of it was like, that's just, you know, for us, I really think that that's the trigger. That was the trigger. Like we talked about this a lot in great detail too for a long time. Pete and I were sitting here and go like, well, it's probably already been there. It's been there. It's been maybe dormant, waiting, and he hit that moment in that time and place. And these things, they saw him, right? The energy saw it and it was like, oh, he's fun. Let's go over there, because he's got a lot of this dark energy that's just kind of waiting in there. And so from the horror movie occult standpoint, that's kind of, you know, that was the gateway into it. But I think for this story, a lot of that stuff was just in there, and it was a trigger. It just triggered all this emotional stuff that he'd been hiding, his guilt and his pain and all those things that, you know, trigger all those kind of emotional spaces that people can get into.
Right.
Well, it's funny that you say that too, because that sort of thing can be a trigger for it's a documented thing, like religious stuff. It can be a trigger for that sort of thing to happen. So I really loved that you guys, you know, touched point on all of those things, and it was layered. And with a lot of movies, like I think Identity did a very good job with that layered, like multiple personality disorder thing. And that was like, oh God, that's terrifying. You know, like I think that's the worst part. The most terrifying thing is not being able to control what is in your mind. And so that was, you guys did beautifully on that. And
thank you.
I adored it. So good job.
Thank you.
Right. Let me, I just wanted to interject really quickly, because what you did in the film is something that could have gone horribly wrong. You shone a spotlight on the mental illness without stigmatizing it. And that's isn't that like a balancing act, right? But it's so funny. Keira and I have discussed doing this specific topic for a show in regards to like demonic possessions and how much of it is actually like mental illness, you know, but I personally kind of struggled with trying to find a way to do it with the right heart and with the right intention. So, because we're not coming after mentally ill people at all, but I think historically the exorcism of Emily Rose type things right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's almost like we're not trying to like prove that God and the devil don't exist or anything. At least I don't think so. But we'd really like to dive deep into that and to see, are there numbers? Are there records? You know, can we prove one way or another? So it's something that we've really talked about. So to see this film, both of us, we were both kind of like, oh my God, somebody else is thinking about this. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Well, you know, and too, like with the question, there's like, she's like, are you talking about God and the devil? I think that Pete and I talked about this too. That's like that's for me is like the easy label to put on it, because that's what so many people would just be like, oh, well, it must be the devil, or, you know, like, especially before there was a lot more knowledge on mental health and stuff. You know, you think about it, everything like the witch trials, all that stuff, just anybody, whether, you know, somebody could have had ADHD or something, and they could have been considered like, oh, this person might be possessed or something, because they can't focus or whatever it is.
Right.
That's
Kind
they
of
were,
like
you know,
autism with lobotomies,
right.
that sort of thing. Yeah.
So before there was some sort of education about it and stuff like that, I mean, just think of through history how much of that stuff was labeled, you know, wow, it must be the devil or whatever, you know, any of that stuff, it could have done it. And I think that's what we wanted to touch on, is like, here's somebody in a clinical space just putting a label on it, you know, like, oh, you're talking about God and the devil. Like, that's as simple as it is, right? It's like, no, there's so much more to this, and these layers, like you were saying too, is like, that's what we wanted. We wanted to just also not try to explain it either. I think it would have been maybe a bit of a disservice if we tried to completely explain it and be like, this is what this is, because like, you know, I don't want to sound like a pretentious filmmaker or like, well, what do you think it means? But I think that that's what we wanted, is that you to go on the journey with him and kind of discover a story that you're like, oh, this is what I'm thinking about, and create conversations with it. And you know, it sounds like we're doing it, so it's good.
well, it's very easy to blame some being or creature or you know, manifestation that's not showing up to defend themselves. You know, the devil's not popping up going, that wasn't me, I didn't do that.
Right.
But I think also a sign of a well done film or a good film is that it's open to interpretation. I think a lot of people do like their films to be neatly tied up at the end, where you're like, oh, you did all for me. But I like finishing a film and sitting there for a few minutes going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
How do you think, you know, that, and the conversation afterwards with, you know, someone that you've watched it with, as Kira and I did. I think it's incredibly well done.
Oh, thank you. It's funny you said that, because the previous film, The Spore, there was a lot of people that didn't like it because it just wasn't a spoon-fed linear movie, you know. And I was like, well, the whole point of that movie was to be more of a fly on the wall. If something like when the pandemic happens, you're like, I was thinking about somebody who's like hiking through the woods and is completely, you know, not connected to anyone, and there's stuff going on out there, and you have no idea. And all of a sudden you walk into it, you have no concept of what this is. And, you know, so the idea of that film was to be in this space where people just walk right into this random thing that's happening on. And all of a sudden they're like, what is going on here? But I think that, you know, you got to challenge people, right? You got to give them a little something. Like I like some of my spoon-fed horror just as much as the next person, right? Like, I mean, great. Those are the movies that I like to just chill, watch, and not have to think about. But sometimes I think you need to be poked in, and horror especially is a good space to question things, right? I mean, we can get away with a lot more and make people think. And that's what I enjoy, is we have a lot of space to play too. You know, we can get away with a lot more stuff.
Nice about horror and the sci-fi genre and the fantasy genre is you can suspend that disbelief. It doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, with a film, definitely love if it leaves you kind of thinking about it. I hate when it ends just abruptly, like they're like, I think we're done. We're just gonna credits.
Right.
Yes, that's where I'm like, you know what? I just wasted an hour and 48 minutes, but to leave it open to interpretation and to have conversations further on. Absolutely. Bring it.
Yeah, that's great.
Well,
I'm
kind
with
of
you.
a good example of something that's not spoon fed. And this is where you have to separate art from the art. But Cabin in the Woods.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Yeah.
It's like, this is not your normal, they're camping in the woods slasher flick.
Yeah.
All of a sudden there's this whole other, thing going on to where you get done watching it and you're talking with the people that watched it with you and you're like, did you see that? Holy shit. Did you see?
Yeah.
And it's like films like that and films like yours where you're still talking about it.
Yeah, I know. I love that movie. That movie was so great.
It was good.
Yeah.
Well, and then the dynamic though, you've got all of these layers, but then you have, I'm sorry, the cinematography was incredible. It was so well done, from the opening scene with the sheet fluttering down and then the light play with Fisher and the doctor. The light play and the shadows help to enhance and capture the emotions and the moods. So what was your decision process to go about these creative attributes? How did you handle that and do that?
Well, I don't know if you noticed some of these things in the movie, but there's a shot one. So we have there's certain times when the camera will just shift to a different angle, and there are actually dead leaves and stuff in the shot, and then you go to a different angle and there's really lush, and some shots we've actually took the green out of the leaves behind them and started shifting it into brown. So it was intentional to create this space that when you're in it, and I noticed, you may or may not notice it, but it's kind of, I guess, subliminal in there, right? There's an ever shifting space. It's just always this spectrum of change, or it might be a little bit colder or things like that. And our thought was, when Pete and I were writing, we're like, these things, they have no, there's no linear sense to anything. They can just be from night to day to cold to leaves, but that's just the way their world moves. It's fluid and it's ever changing. And I wanted to have that kind of weird sense of you could turn and be in another space or shot and it looks different or weird. There's just something a little off to it. So
right.
It was a creative choice, and it was also part of shooting in the woods on an independent, movie. You're like, well, we've got to use what we have. So let's use the changing of these things and start
right.
making things be a part of the story.
Right.
But yeah, Keith, our DP and stuff, he's great. Some of the things he lights with what he does, you're just that just doesn't make any sense how you can use one light like that and make that look as good as it does. But yeah, he's really good with that stuff. So
yeah, it was phenomenal. And going back to the skipping, I wrote in my notebook, because I was watching this and taking notes. I wrote in my notebook, was door locked, door opened, question mark,
yeah.
And then whenever I started to, it kind of made me pause and go back and be like, okay, once I figured it out, now I've got to go back and kind of watch that duality that you've got. So, and I noticed it light and then dark, and then him in the house laying on it, asleep on the table versus just being out in the woods. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And then I figured it out, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's incredible. Yeah. So going off of that and your previous experience within the industry, which has been over 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you worked for special effects on big name movies like Starship Troopers and Predator. So how did all of this experience come into play, creating the set and the aesthetics that we saw?
Well, I think that, from the beginning, when I was a kid, this is pretty much all I've wanted to do anyways, is make monster movies and stuff. So, a lot. I think when I was in LA, having all of those experiences, working on all those big movies, working on all of those shows, they just gave me such a huge palette of things. Like as you become like this filmmaker, you're kind of like, oh, now I know how to do that. Now I'm going to learn how to do this. Some of it is born out of necessity, you know, because you're especially when we were in LA, I'd want to go shoot something, but you're like, oh, you need a permit, you need this, you need that. So you have to be very creative and figure out how to do things. And a lot of times do them on your own because people get busy and stuff like that. So a lot of that comes from learning all of those tasks. And then when we got here, you don't have a lot of that red tape that you have to deal with like you do in LA to film. People are like, oh, I've got 28 acres that you can go film on or whatever. Just have at it. So it's like Disneyland. You're just like, oh, what? I can go use that place? I can do this and that. So all of that knowledge, all of that stuff just kind of comes together. And, you know, a lot of the demons and stuff were all built in like my basement effect shop. And a lot of the effects work is like, I knew how to do all that stuff. So here we are, we're going to start building these things and making them. And our daughter, Zoe, was one of the demons in the movie. And so it was nice because she's in the house. So I was like, Zoe, get down here. I can keep testing and putting the suit on you and making sure it fits. And then, you know, she was such a trooper. She just would go out there and it would be, some nights it'd be really cold and she would just get in that costume and do her thing. And then, you know, I'm like, yeah, I've worked with bigger actors who've complained about, you know, and she was great. She just got out there and did that. She is 13. She's going to be 14 here in like 2 weeks.
You're raising
happy birthday.
That's right.
What's that?
You're raising the next generation.
Yes. Yeah.
Of horror fanatic.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, she just watched the movie with her two friends here today. And so I was kind of doing okay, I'll leave you guys alone. But of course, I was sitting around the corner, like trying to listen in. Like, how are they? Like, do they understand what's going on? Or are they just like, you know? But they seem to track with it. You know, I'm sure there's some things that were like, whatever. But I did a little breakdown at the beginning of the movie, like, okay, this is not your typical movie. It's not linear. It's not this and that. Okay. So they made it through it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, your daughter did such a great job because I was looking at the cast and I noticed and I was like, oh, she did really good. You know, like
Aww.
I loved it. I love whenever, you know, creatives will bring their family into things. I think that makes it special in a different way. Like it's like a family bonding time, you know, but it's more sweeter whenever I'm like, I guess it's because I'm a mom and I've got a family. So I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, that's the best thing ever. You know, like what in the world would you like? Why would you want to act with anybody else?
Well, it's true. It's a whole family affair because my wife's the executive producer. You know, my son will come out to set and just do stuff on, you know, work the slate or run the fog machines and stuff. So it is kind of funny that, you know, here's our wonderfully tight, beautiful family out here making these really weird, creepy movies. But it is the set. Everybody on set was just, it bonded really well, you know, because we shot the film in the pandemic. And I think, you know, there was like a crew of 5 of us. And so, I mean, we were moving fog machines around in circles and shooting and, you know, it was kind of crazy, but we pulled it off.
Yeah, y'all did really good. I wouldn't have been able to tell that it was made during a pandemic with 5 people. I'm going to tell you that.
Yeah, good.
It was really good. Very well done. Good. So I noticed the shout out to Wes Craven.
Mm-hmm.
So is he one of those that inspired you to become a writer and a director in horror?
He is. So I'll tell this quick little story. When I was a kid and I saw Nightmare on Elm Street and it freaked me out. Like, you know, of course, Freddy Krueger, you're just like, what is this? And I think the night I saw the movie, I had like 102 fever later that night. So I was kind of like hallucinating. And I kept telling my mom, I think I hear Freddy Krueger. else. And it was funny because it was almost like mirroring the movie. You got to stop watching those scary movies. So after a point in time, I really kind of embraced Freddy and more horror, and I had my walls plastered with Freddy, just pictures of them, posters and everything. Well, cut to much later in Hollywood, I got a opportunity to write a column for Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, and I was writing this column about like iconic props, the Phantasm ball, the Freddy Krueger glove, and I got to interview Wes, and the interview went really well. Like he took a shine to me or whatever, and from there. It became kind of like, oh, do you want to go to breakfast or do you want to, see a movie or whatever? So things like that, it just kind of snowballed into this great relationship with him. So he was definitely, I mean, to think about that as being a kid, and here's this guy who created this, these like Scream and Elm Street and Last House and you're just sitting across from him. And you're just having a conversation, and he's like this guy who is such a huge influence, and he was so genuine and nice and a great mentor, and just so to have that, is just, it just kind of blows your mind sometimes when you think about, I can't believe I'm sitting here with him and doing this. But yeah, so a lot of this stuff, short films and stuff, I'll kind of have his name in it right now because he was a very big, at the time I was working in TV and I was kind of like, I don't know, I guess in the doldrums, because I was like, this isn't really what I want to be doing. I mean, of course it's a good job, I'm not going to complain or whatever, but you come to Hollywood to follow your dreams and make movies and whatever. And he was the one who was like, well, why aren't you doing the thing that you're really passionate about? You need to get back out there and do it. So that kicked off those short films that we have on our website and stuff, and then just kind of led into, so Wes definitely pushed me back into it.
That's really incredible. It's one of those things that, you look at it, you're like, I'm having pancakes with the guy who gave me nightmares.
Yes, exactly.
Woo, cheers.
Yeah. Yeah,
and like
funny.
And the thing is like you bring up Nightmare on Elm Street, and that was like, my dad was a huge horror fan, all horrors, C, B, A movies. My dad got yelled at because he introduced me to like The Exorcist at like 4 years old. Okay. Yeah. So like we were horror buddies. We would watch these movies. My mom was like, I swear you're going to screw her up. She's going to have some kind of mental issues because of what you're doing to her. And I remember that I was okay with all of them except for 2, and Poltergeist was 1.
Yes.
Because it's like, you can't control any of that. Like anything that's like spiritual. I was just like, I felt so gross. And I felt like my soul was being sucked out of my body when I was watching that. So that was terrifying. And then Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, I was scared to go to sleep because I was like, if I go to sleep, this guy could come get me. And that's it. Like, I have to stay awake. I think I pulled probably close to like a 48-hour at like 6 years old, staying awake.
Oh my
like I'm not
gosh.
going to sleep.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that's so powerful. And Poltergeist was the same for me too, because I had that tree in my backyard. The night I saw Poltergeist, it was doing the whole lightning storm and everything. I came home and I was up in my bedroom and I was looking at that tree and I was like, no way. Like, this is not going to end well tonight.
Terrifying. Yes. And that's like, but he kicked me off to the horror genre.
That's awesome.
And so like, I got to tell him, I was like, guess who I'm interviewing, Dad? He's like, I was like, not believe you right now. And I was like, I'm living my dream. You helped me get there. Thank you.
That's so cool.
But so like that you bring that up, I was just like, yeah, I feel that. I feel those feels, you, me, same page.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Peter Tell's performance was emotionally driven in the best way imaginable. And it left me feeling connected to the character in a very raw and real way, with the loss, the internal struggle, fear, etc. And it almost seems as if Peter had become that character. So like, was there any guidance from outside of him to do this, like to portray Fisher the way he did? Or was that just all Peter?
That's just all Pete.
Oh my gosh, he's so amazing.
Raw talent. I mean, and
Yeah.
he's the nicest, most humble dude. And you're sometimes you watch him do what he does on set, and you're just like, I mean, you're like, you feel like you're watching someone like really come unhinged, and then we'll say cut, and he'll sit up. And some scenes were really, really emotionally taxing. I mean, there was a couple times when he's like, I gotta leave the set, like, and I get it, like go off over there, catch yourself, get back into, because he would just sit there and get into that. And for somebody who doesn't have like years of formal training or anything, to watch him drop into those spaces, it blows your mind. I mean, honestly, it makes my job just incredibly easy to just be like, all right, Pete, let's do it. You know what I mean? And like, here's the scene. I know then there's times when we have to stop. There was a couple times in the movie when we were filming where like the scene when he was strangling himself, and like he was like, I was like, dude, stop. Like I think
he was all in on that one.
All in. We did 4 takes and that was it. I was like, even 4 takes was probably too much, but he was like, I got another one in me. And I was like, yeah, I can't send you home like in a body bag, like from film set. That's not a good idea. So
right.
He puts his everything into it. I mean, he really does. He's just a great partner to work with.
I did notice that. And like, I hope we can get him to come talk to us too.
Oh, absolutely. He would love to,
because he is phenomenal. And you're right. Like I would never have been able to tell that he wasn't classically trained. Like just by like, it looks like he's had some kind of theater or like that kind of experience, because he was able to like get into that mentality, that darkness. And I know like, and that's something that I'm like, I'm curious how he was able to do that, because, I know a lot of creatives like me, when I'm writing, I tap into like dark pieces of my soul and experiences that I've had. Yeah. So it would be really interesting to see how he was able to do that, because like it was uncanny. It was unreal to see how well he did.
Yes, I would love to have you guys interview him so I could hear what he says.
Well, we'll make that happen then.
Fascinating.
Right? Matt will be like the surprise guest. He'll be like, oh yeah, well, you didn't tell me that when we were filming.
Yeah, exactly. I'll hide behind the curtain and pop out.
So do you have anything new coming up that we should keep our eyes on?
Well, it's funny because Pete and I, we shot this pilot that is completely opposite of everything we've just done, which is this really goofy monster comedy thing that we shot. We have like a little 30-minute pilot of basically like The Office or Parks and Rec and Ghostbusters, and then we're also starting to shoot, I guess, if you will, kind of like this little network that we're building of new kind of creepy, spooky, fun family stuff too, like with puppet monsters and more stuff like that. So we're looking at trying to do a bunch of that. And there's a couple other scripts that I've got in the works. One's really cool creepy thing, and some other ones are kind of more fun like comedy horror stuff, because I just love that space too. I love the movies like I don't know, have you ever seen this movie Grabbers or like just a lot of those kind of just really silly funny monster movie things. I love those. I'm like itching to make those. Tremors. Like, yes. Yeah.
Attack of the Rotten Tomatoes is like one of my favorites. Yes. Like growing up, I was like, Dad, the Rotten Tomatoes, I need to rent that from Blockbuster.
Yeah. Anything like that. Like I just or the Blob from 1988, Night of the Creeps, anything that has that. I mean, clearly I have a Killbots poster on our wall that tells you what kind of movies I like.
One of my favorite films is Army of Darkness. So I am right.
Oh, yes.
I mean, how many times did you see that in the theater? Did you see that in the theater? Am I dating myself? Because
I have it on VHS still.
I was too young
Yes,
to
you
go to
do.
the theater to see that.
Yeah.
No, but
I
Like,
know.
you're a baby, get out.
At
Well,
least
that movie's just so great. I mean, even the Ash versus Evil Dead series, I love that series. I just love how over the top it is.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's so talking about shooting in the woods with the leaves and everything. And I was thinking, you know who else liked to shoot in the woods? Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell, Josh Beck, Ed Raimi, all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, all the Michigan boys.
That's right, the Michigan boys. I wanted to ask just a couple logistic questions. Where was the film? Where was it located?
We actually shot it in Lowell, Michigan.
Oh, Michigan. Okay.
Michigan, yeah. So we shot the Spore and Three Demons here, like back to back in Michigan. So when we moved here, when we landed here, it was basically like from the time we got here, maybe about 6 months before we started filming movies. So not bad, but yeah, they were both shot on private property. Keith, who is the DP and producer, he has 28 acres of property. So we could go there and be like completely isolated and shoot the film there. So it was good. It's like having your own back lot.
For sure. And my other question is purely SFX or actually practical effects. What was the bird poop made out of? I have to, yeah.
That's funny. That was yogurt.
Okay, now that you go off with that, I want to ask about strawberry jam. Like I saw like something that was like some like the blood or whatever. It looked like it was strawberry jam. Am I right?
We make this stuff, and you guys have probably heard of this. We make this stuff called Ultra Slime.
Okay.
And it's the same slime that they used in Ghostbusters and Alien and stuff like that. But so we put red food dye in there, and it's like a food additive. and it's just like the jelly out of a donut or something.
Right.
Because you can make it real thick and goopy. So like the scene in the cabin, all of that stuff was just super thick Ultra Slime.
Okay.
We make a lot of our own bloods and stuff too. Yeah. Because we can have control over the colors and the look of it. So
I would love to talk with Matt again, just specifically about special effects. We could get Scott Reed, the prop master, down in Austin. You've probably heard of him because he was talking about that the slime and how breakaway glass is made and how they make blood puddles on the floor, but it's not actually liquid. So I would love to sit and talk special effects.
Oh, for sure. I can do that all day.
I need an ingredients list though, so like I can make all of this stuff as we're talking about it, and then I can show you my finished product and I can be like, nailed it, not really.
Right. We can judge you. It'll be great.
It's like a cooking show, but we're cooking up slimes. Yeah. But yeah, it'll be a lot. And especially since you have been in this business for 20 years, the advancements, from sugar glass to these actual, like, I think it's like a resin, things like that. That would be a really great conversation to have. I would love to do that.
No, that would be a lot of fun because it's funny because sometimes I still go with what just the simplest, goofiest things, like if you saw how some of the creature things were built in the Spore and stuff, you would be like, what? Really? That's how they did that? But it works. It just works, and it like I'm such a practical effects person. I like the tangibility of it. I like that also if you have actors who aren't as seasoned, that know how to act with a tennis ball or whatever, it's way easier. Just like we'll put them in the scene with the thing, and
and you get an honest reaction.
And plus blood and goo and all that stuff, it just goes where it wants to go, and that's what makes it fun, because there's times when things just go wrong and you get the shot and you're like, oh, that was perfect. It's a happy accident, and I love those that we have. you get those all the time in filming. You're like, yep, don't change that. Don't do anything. That was great.
Right. You cut off the, you know, the fake arm and the blood spurts up their nose, and it's like, cut.
Yes. Yes.
Keep
Yeah. And if you tried to do that digitally, it's going to look horrible.
I feel like I've missed my calling in life, because I feel at this point now I'd be a great candidate for like an actress for a horror film, because I've got like this texture, tactile, like sensory issue, like anything that's gooey, anything, I'm just going to be screaming and grossed out and running away.
Right.
And I feel like I have missed my calling in life. Like I was built for this.
Yeah. Well, you never know.
You know, if we might be able to be extras, you know.
That's right.
Yeah.
You don't get paid, but you do get lunch.
We feed you very well, by the way.
I'm that kid that you see at the parties that's got like a drink in one hand and is sitting by the snack table just constantly shoving food in my mouth.
Yeah.
So that's like the perfect payment. I've always been that way. People know where to find me. They'll be like, okay, she's at the table.
Well, that's how we pay Pete in sandwiches. We always joke about sandwiches. Like, is this a 2-sandwich movie? Do I have to pay? How many sandwiches do I have to pay you? And I always knew where to find Pete. It'd be at the snack table, because he, you know, we made sure we had all the goodies that he liked. And I'd be like, where's Pete? Oh, right. He's probably over at the snack table. And there he was.
Like Pete. I like Pete. He seems like he might be my spirit animal.
Yeah, he is. Point. He's awesome. You guys should definitely talk to him. I mean, he's so much fun, and the way his brain works too, you know, like some of the insight that he'll tell you on the movie is fascinating.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Absolutely.